Hey everyone, thanks again for joining me for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast. Before we launch into this next episode, I have to give a quick shout out to a couple of sponsors and also give everyone a heads up that if you were thinking about attending the spring rendezvous put on by the Archives of Falconry in Boise, Idaho from April 18th to the 20th, don't sit on registering for very much longer. There's not very many spots left. Just a reminder, the theme of this year's rendezvous is the Quarry of Falconry, and the event is going to include a film screening. It's going to include an amazing lineup of speakers, a special reception, a discussion about avian flu, Wall of Remembrance induction, banquet, and I think they're even going to have a raffle this year too. So if you're wanting to register, don't sit too much longer on it because, like I said, spots are almost gone. Head to falconry.org, register, and hope to see you there. I'd also like to give a quick shout out to one of the sponsors of the Extreme Performance Outdoor Network, being onX. And if you're not incorporating the onX app into your normal hunting routine, well, you're missing out on a lot of pretty neat features. It is really nice for me to be able to keep track of a lot of my favorite hunting spots in the app. And I also like to use it to scout for other potential spots, and it gives you the landowner's information so you can contact them and possibly see if you can try and get permission to be on their land to hunt and other cool things. I mean, there's lots of great features in this app. So if you are interested in getting a subscription to onX, which I highly recommend, then just head to onxmaps.com and sign up using our promo code HXP20 and get a discount on a new subscription and start knowing where you stand with onX. And I'd also like to give a quick shout out to our good friend from Poland, Baba Yaga Crafts. And I know pretty soon you're going to need to be restocking some supplies and accessories for next year's hunting season. So whether it's maybe a set of hybrid jesses, which change from used to field by one twist of a swivel slit, or a new 100% hand-sewn made-to-measure glove, or a really nice new set of anklets for your bird with the easy twist nut sewn into it, he can take care of you. And right now, he'll also take care of you with free shipping, too, if you mention the Falconry Chronicles podcast in your order. Just put in the word Chronicles or just mention the podcast in your order, and you'll get free shipping from Poland, which, as you all know, is a nice chunk of change. So don't hesitate. Don't sit on putting your order in. Get it in well ahead of the hunting season so you get it on time, and enjoy. He makes great stuff. Now, on to this next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast.
And when ducks would try to leave, she would start stoops at them and intimidate them back in, but she would maintain her pitch, and she never lost control of the pond. And just like a wild peregrine, she watched this large group of ducks, and she waited, showed the patience to wait, like a good duck hawk is patient. And she showed the patience to wait until one group, diving ducks, redheads, tried to escape out the side. She didn't stoop at the water, and she waited until they cleared over land and then started her stoop and knocked one through a mesquite tree and brought it to bag. And this was a bird that was literally on the beach 60 days before and had come into falconry and just soaked it up, and one of the easy ones.
Hey everyone, so this episode is going to take us back down to Texas again. And so, as you all know, I've already published some episodes that I recorded while I was in more of the eastern part of the state, but this episode, along with several others that I have yet to publish as well, were from whenever I was in more of the western part of the state, attending the Texas Hawking Association meet earlier this year in January while I was in Lubbock. And our guest for this episode is also the current president of the Texas Hawking Association, Roelke, and he was kind enough to have me down and record him along with several other falconers while we were all at that meet together earlier this year. It was a lot of fun, and I'm very happy to be able to bring even more Texas falconer stories to you all, and including Corey's here. So before we jump right in to this next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, I just want to say thanks again to Corey and the Texas Hawking Association for having me down. Texas is such a big state, and everybody's so spread out and stuff, so I really appreciate Corey and the THA's help in organizing this so I can get a lot of these falconers' stories out to you from Texas. So without saying any more, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in to this episode with Corey Roelke. Here we go. Thanks for having me down. appreciate
Thanks
it.
for coming. I'm glad we could finally get you down. It's been too long.
Yeah. No, it's been nice kind of seeing more state clubs, start to come around a little bit and kind of be a proponent of the idea of, trying to make sure that their falconers and their state and stuff have some degree of the archival aspect.
Falconry, North American falconry is very interesting because it's so modern. And so thankfully we have largely the entire genesis of the Texas Hawking Association still available to us, which is part of the reason we wanted you here so that you could get some of these voices and get their stories.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, we're coming to that point where a lot of these folks are aging out and passing on, and we're losing the ability to record these stories. So we're very glad you're here, and glad you could talk to a lot of these folks.
Yeah. No, it's my pleasure. And like I said, I'm thankful for the invite and thankful for the people that enjoy it and see the value in it. You know what I mean? And but yeah, I mean, I know like our state club in Indiana, we have someone that's kind of in charge of keeping all the archival stuff specific for the history of the state club and stuff. And I don't know how many state clubs there are that do that, but it's been nice kind of getting a chance to, I don't know, almost stumble and fall into this ability to help people kind of maintain and preserve their stories and stuff. So it's all good. But yeah, no, it's fun. It's just something I've come to really enjoy, and glad people enjoy it also. But as far as this morning, apologies for for needing to just stay comatose for a little while. I
completely understand.
Dude, I really wanted to get out for a little bit, but I made just the stupid decision just to go ahead and stay out a little bit longer last night. I didn't get like super toasty or anything, but you know how it is, man. It's just like, I don't think there's going to ever be enough time in the rest of my life to make up all of the sleep debt that I've accumulated.
Ever.
And especially with working a couple of night shifts leading up to coming down here, and then only getting 6 hours of sleep the first night that, was here, and recording all day yesterday and everything. It just goes without saying. Yeah, 6 o'clock, the alarm went off this morning, and I was just like, nope. And
I make the joke all the time, especially at NAFA meets, that if you're going to stay the whole week, or for like our meet, which is like 4 days long, you got to find a time to take a nap. If you don't, you will just crash at some point.
Yes, or get so deathly ill that
exactly.
it's you might as well just be completely out of commission or dead, because it's man, I've been on. Have you ever had a case of just the total like I don't know, like several years ago when I went to the NAMM convention, which is a big music convention, in Anaheim and stuff. Man, I got the namthrax. We call it namthrax there. So bad, man. And I was literally doing, the front and back end deal, when I was there. Just worst GI bug ever. And I was splitting the room with one of my really good musician buddies and stuff.
Your poor friend.
Oh man, I felt so horrible. And he was nice enough to, let me stay with him as a thank you for helping him out with some other stuff. And from then on out, I swore that most of these functions like this, I would either start popping Zicam leading into it, or at least extra, vitamin D or whatever,
Drink a lot of water.
Oh yeah, you have to. It's a must.
Absolutely.
And has that ever happened to you before? Have you ever just been?
So I'm yes, absolutely, that's happened. But I'm different. I'm pretty. I would say cognizant of it, and I try and go to bed as early as possible. And I'm funny because I don't control when I wake up. I wake up like an old person. And so whether the alarm goes off or not, I'm awake. Mm-hmm. And like I got up at 3:30 this morning, and then I said, oh, I can sleep a couple more hours. And then I went back to sleep. And then the alarm was set for 5:20, and I woke up at 5:14. And so like I know, and then we were in the car driving away, getting ready. I mean, we had a bird up before sunrise this morning.
Really?
So we were ready. We were kind of ready in case the wind got up, right? But in Lubbock, it's sometimes out here in the panhandle of Texas, it's a race to get birds flown. A lot of times our winds are moderate in the morning and they come up in the afternoon, and you say, well, let's get out there at the crack of dawn and try and get the birds flown. And, it worked out today. So.
Yeah, no, that's good. And yeah, the wind, I don't know. Like we were talking about that some yesterday. Like when I was talking to Jay and stuff, is about mid-morning yesterday is when the wind really started picking up. Yep. And it just, at least, especially for dirt hawking, it just destroys like all joy.
Yeah, it makes it a lot less fun. And it makes it, with long wing, it could just cuts your opportunities. Some birds fly really well in the wind, and it's impressive when they catch, but it kind of cuts your opportunities a little bit in terms of, how you can fly ponds or what you're trying to do. So, and like you said, it just makes it way less fun.
Yeah, I mean, it just cuts you to the bone, and then you start, especially like, out west here, getting all the dirt and grit in your mouth and stuff afterwards, and you just feel just straight up just disgusting. And
yeah, when I drove into Lubbock the other day, there was a dust storm. The sun was blacked out.
Yeah, that no. Yeah, no thank you. I'm good. I can skip a day. It's fine, stuff like that. I mean, but yeah, no, I mean, our group back home is pretty hardcore about stuff. I mean, they're itching to get started, first thing in the morning and all that kind of stuff. And I know, like, for the guys that that have the really hard, like, hardcore long winger theories when it comes to, or the preferences of, I only fly an hour after sunset, or
exactly.
hour after sunrise. I mean, an hour before sunset, and all this kind of stuff.
I'm not like that. Yeah. I will generally fly whenever there's a slip in pretty gnarly weather conditions. But I definitely have preferences.
Yeah. I can understand everybody's. I mean, what works for one person is not necessarily going to work for another, and I get all of that. But it's funny. I was talking to some of the guys yesterday about the whole long winger, mentality and the theories, and how just it's a special collection of opinions.
Absolutely, and nobody agrees. I laugh that I work really hard to try and get my birds to fly well as often as I can, right? I want them to fly well all the time, and that of course doesn't always happen, but in the moment when that bird is up above you in good position and it starts its stoop on its way down, I think of that as the culmination of all this work and effort that I have done for that day, that week, that month, this year, last year, 5 years ago. And all of that is leading in to that moment in time when that bird starts down, and you're going to see if it catches the quarry or not. And it's all just anticipation leading to that. And, that's why, for better or for worse, I think a lot of long wingers kind of sometimes lose their temper or get really upset because they have worked so hard to get to that moment. And when it doesn't work out, it can be incredibly frustrating. I used to get so mad. I've really tried to get less angry about it as I get older. Although my wife told me that I was duck hawking in my sleep the other night. And so, it doesn't quite leave.
Yeah, no. And I've really, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's something that I've talked about briefly before, but it would be nice to kind of hit on it again, that, we talk about the same types of things over and over again on this podcast, and for good reason. And, for anybody that's thinking about getting into this, they need to really understand what they're getting into. And that is one of the things that people need to be really conscientious of. And I know it's been very hard for me to get better about it myself over the years as well, is that I sometimes have let my overall outlook on life, and especially that day, be defined by how well my falconry day went.
Absolutely.
And I have tried my damnedest over the years to just stop caring as much.
Well, my thing is, I just try and not export the negativity. It doesn't always work, but try and not export the negativity when it doesn't go super well.
Yeah. It's so hard because, like you said, I mean, it's all really hard work. It doesn't matter if you're, what you're flying or what you're trying to do. There's a lot of work and a lot of time, effort, and energy, usually in the form of at least a month, 2 months, whatever, of energy that's spent trying to get this to go the way that you want it. And, having just delved just the slightest bit into that bigger long wing world, with flying these bigger falcons, I get it, because like it is a lot more work. in my humble opinion.
I don't know about if it's a lot more work. What I tell people, so I fly passage peregrines. I have 2 passage peregrines, and I actually have a chamber peregrine. But what I tell people is it is a lot of work, but it's much more about the consistency and doing things on a routine and making sure those birds are flown the way that you think they should be flown for the conditions in the quarry you have consistently, because the consistency is what makes a bird successful. And a lot of people have to take time away for their job or for their family, and that's fine. And that happens. That's happened to me several times. That happens all the time. But to try and gel on the consistency and say, well, we can fly 4 days this week, we can fly 5 days next week, and you're always going to lose days to weather and things like that. But to say, well, what am I trying to train for, or how am I hawking today that's going to impact tomorrow? I don't remember which guest you had on this podcast, but someone said, and I literally don't remember, someone said that if you don't think that you're shaping your bird every single flight, and honestly, every interaction that you have, but every single flight, then you're fooling yourself, right? Everything you're doing is shaping to the next flight and things like that. So, yeah, and we are very lucky here in Texas. I live in Dallas-Fort Worth. I live in Arlington, Texas, which now DFW is the 4th largest metropolitan area in the country, and it is challenging like everyone. Everything's getting swallowed up by development. We are losing places to hawk. We are losing quarry. I am very fortunate that close to my home, we have excellent, consistent duck hawking. And it is a normal day for me to come home in the afternoon. I get up and I work early, and I work during the day. And I have a flexible job, and to come home and to go out in the late afternoon and find 2 duck slips. And a lot of people would kill for that, right? A lot of people would kill for that kind of consistency. And I'm upset if I don't find the slips, that if it's a bad day or whatever and I can't find it. There are days that I get really lucky and I go out and I leave my house and I fly 2 birds and I get 2 nice flights on ducks, and I come home and it's slightly over an hour, right? And so very, very fortunate in a large metropolitan area to still be able to do that and have access with landowners, because Texas is all private. So all of this is permissions that I've gotten over the years, and I lose ponds all the time, and I try and find new ponds, and it's a constant struggle. And then, you've talked to a few other people here at this meet. We're very fortunate to have essentially unprecedented access in the modern era of falconry to passage peregrines, and we have a passage peregrine culture. Most of us who are flying long wings here in Texas are flying passage peregrines and doing very well. They're called the duck hawk for a reason. There are other birds, obviously, like deer peregrine, tiercels, and things that can do amazingly well on ducks, but in terms of just your average bird that you take out of the wild, I don't think that there's a better bird for ducks than passage peregrines. There are certainly birds that are equal, but I don't think there's a better bird for them. They just do it tremendously well, and the vast majority of them take to ducks very well. And for the average person who wants to fly a falcon, they are pretty amenable. They generally do what they're supposed to. They meet you halfway. They do have a couple of frustrating characteristics. They have the ability to, if they decide to leave, they have the ability to put some incredible distances between you and them. That's helped by GPS transmitters. Obviously, we can tell what they're doing. You can tell if that bird is straight lining away from you, or if that bird is just a couple thousand feet away or even a couple miles away, but it's sort of staying in the area. That nightmare that everyone has is you watch that dot on the GPS just go in a straight line downwind, especially south, and just leaving. Yep. And that's happened to people. But outside of those things, and there's ways to ameliorate that, outside of that, they're wonderful birds to fly. And they're individuals. There's good ones and bad ones, and ones that are really hardcore and ones that are less hardcore. And sometimes they come kind of imprinted from the wild with a specific hunting style, and you may have to mess with that. But if we trap these on the beach, on the Texas beaches, you've heard with a lot of people, and there are birds that get trapped by the bird banders. And so those birds are painted and they have bands on them, and you can't keep those birds. And some of those birds people have accidentally trapped. Falconers have accidentally trapped them. And it's interesting because some of those birds especially, but other birds, you'll release them and they will literally wait on over your truck on the beach for you to throw another pigeon. That bird's been trapped twice, and it's waiting for you to throw another pigeon. That bird is halfway to a falconry bird on the beach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
and like you said, they're all individuals. It doesn't matter if it's hawks, falcons, whatever the case. Some are going to be so much more, just Johnny on the spot with their transition to being a falconry bird than some of these others that just, yeah, sure, you can maybe make him into one, but it's going to be so much time, effort, and energy. Is the juice really worth the squeeze? But yeah, overall, I mean, the journey to that, I've tried my best to just start being better, and like you said, not taking a bad falconry day out on the rest of life, and everything else, just that's involved with it. It seems like there was a period of time where I was letting my overall viewpoint and outlook on myself and how I was doing be partially defined by how well my falconry seasons were going. And it's just like, well, okay, it's not that black and white, and you just have to retrain yourself and reconvince yourself and just remind yourself that this is supposed to be fun and it's supposed to be a thing that enriches your life, not drag it down and whatever. And
I had something that happened to me I realized a couple of years ago, and my usual routine is to fly 2 birds and run the dog when I can. And so I run an English Springer Spaniel named Hella, and she helps on a lot of our duck flights. There's some places I can't fly her because a road is too close, or there's livestock in the field that are not dog friendly or things like that. Sometimes people put donkeys in fields and to protect the cows, and donkeys will kill a dog. So you got to be kind of careful with things like that. But I would go out with the dog and the 2 birds, and I realized that if any of the 3 of them did well, if the dog did pretty much what it was supposed to do, and either of the birds did what it was supposed to do, I was okay with the day. And then if all of them did what they were supposed to do and everything kind of lined up, I was over the moon. I was ecstatic. I was super happy and content and satisfied. But if none of them did what they were supposed to do and nothing worked that day, it was a bad mood.
Yeah.
And I had to, realize that was going on and be like, okay, well, and fortunately I have birds that I like and birds that play the game, and then a dog that is well trained and enjoys it. So we have more good days than bad, which is, fortunate.
Yeah, I mean, overall, hell hath no fury like a falconer coming home with an empty game bag or without a bird or a dog or whatever. And yeah, I mean, it is what it is. But yeah, so as far as the morning goes, I mean, what did I miss? Did I miss anything this morning?
Oh, we had a good morning.
Of course you did. Yeah.
Yeah, we had an excellent morning. So we took out Hesper Fang, and her hybrid that she's flying caught a mallard, which was really nice. And then I flew my 2 birds, and each of them caught a shoveler. So not the most, amazing ducks, but actually both of them were killed in the stoop. So they were nice flights.
Nice.
Yeah. And then we tried to do a little bit of trapping, threw a trap for a merlin and some things like that. Didn't come up with anything, but yeah.
It sounds like a great day then. Yeah,
it was.
I mean, 3 birds and 3, three birds, 3 catches. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. No, I wish I could see more long winging more consistently.
Well, you're always welcome here. And that's a huge part of our club. And I do want to talk about our club some.
For sure.
Yeah. So we are interesting because we're such a big state, obviously. And we're an incredibly diverse state in terms of our landscapes. East Texas is biologically the South. So I'm a biologist with the University of Texas at Arlington, and my primary responsibility is teaching undergraduate students, but I also teach and advise some graduate students, and I do research. And my research is on reptiles and amphibians, but I enjoy looking at all wildlife and landscapes and birds, especially from a personal level. So I know a lot about the biogeography of Texas. And, East Texas is biogeographically the American South. And then South Texas is like generally considered to be Mexican coastal plain. A lot of South Texas is like that. West Texas is very much like true West Texas is like New Mexico. And the Panhandle is the Central Plains, like where we are today. And then there's some unique areas like the Hill Country. But that means that we have a lot of falconers. We're a populous state spread all throughout the state, all hawking different things. We make the joke that if you were to split Texas into 4 normal sized states, you'd have 3 or 4 falconry clubs. And so we have a lot of members. We have over 400 licensed falconers in the state. The Texas Hawking Association membership fluctuates up and down, but it's always at least several hundred members. And we really, really try to be a good resource for anyone in this state who wants to be a falconer or anyone who wants to come to Texas to hawk. We are an inclusive and welcoming hawking culture. I love that about us. This is the falconry culture I was brought up into, and it's wonderful. We encourage people. We have people at this meet, I think, from 9 or 10 different states. Mm-hmm. We have people from the East Coast. We have people from the Great Lakes region. We've got people from all over the place, and they're here to enjoy good hawking, and we're thrilled they're here. So, I mean, I've hawked in some places where people just weren't quite that friendly, to be honest, mm-hmm. and we're happy to have people. So we really try to help anyone who wants to get into falconry, and the Texas Hockey Association has always been that way. I take great pride in the fact that we are really, honestly, in terms of a state falconry club, a huge club, and we've never split. This organization in its entire history has never split. We've never had the factions that developed where people said, I'm going to go take my ball and go home. We know we're stronger together. We try and give everyone a voice. Everyone gets their say. Of course, we don't always agree. But everyone gets their say, and everybody gets their chance to make their case. But by and large, we're a group of friends too. Like I pretty much like everyone at this meet, and we're going to have well over 100 people here. So yeah, it's a good organization that has a good mission and good implementation too. We have excellent meets. So we have this meet, which is the THA annual field meet. We have the Bushy Tail Bash, which is our squirrel focused meet in East Texas. And then we have some other events around the state. There's an interesting thing that's happened with all clubs and all organizations, and that when the internet came into being and it matured, people used to be in organizations for information. That was their way to connect with people mm-hmm. and to get information. And that's all changed. The world's largest falconry club is Facebook, and everybody can now connect with anyone at any time. So while we provide lots of information, lots of help to people, we realized as an organization, our greatest thing that we could offer our falconry community was what we're doing right now at this meet, is we could have high quality events that people wanted to come to, and hopefully people enjoyed and they kept coming back to, and that events were the thing that we could give. Now, if you're a strong introvert and you're not super social, maybe events aren't your thing, and we get that, and we're there to help you too. But if you want to come hang out with people who are also excited about falconry and also excited about hawking and can help you hawk better, this is a great place to do it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, no, and I will give you all props, because one thing that I always notice, like having been involved in not just falconry related large coordinated events, but even things ranging from that to Comic Cons to all other stuff, being volunteers and helping out with these different types of things. You start to pick up really quick on who has their organizational skills and, just that coordination planning ability and who doesn't. And to be, just blunt or whatever, but it becomes really apparent who's good at coordinating things and who's sure. And some places are better than others. It is what it is. I mean, you're always going to have that.
Of course,
not everybody has the same ability to bring stuff together and make stuff happen like other people, and that's totally fine. But my point is I'm going to give you all a compliment in that it was very apparent initially that you guys try and go that extra step to get people paired up with other people and help organize those things and stuff. There's a lot of meets and a lot of places that don't do really any of that. It's really up to the person coming of their own volition and of their own self-motivation to get paired up with people, ask people, whatever. And it seems to me like this is another one of those meets and another one of those organizations that tries to go the extra step in helping people coordinate those things so that, like you said, even like the people that might be more introverted or a little bit less outgoing and things still have the chance to be included and see what they want to see. So props to you all.
Thank
on
you.
that,
Appreciate that. And that's intentional. And we're very lucky that we have a lot of excellent people in our organization with good organizational skills, who are also excellent falconers who, want to see other people succeed. That's a scary thing for a newbie, right? To come to a big organization where everybody's sitting there talking and everybody already seems like friends, and to try and break into that.
Yeah.
That's a scary, and we, that barrier will always be there. We try and lower that barrier. And we're active too. If you message us, we'll get back to you. We're not one of those organizations that'll leave you hanging out there in the wind. So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. And I think that, with the state, like you said, with Texas being such a huge state and with an organization that has to encompass such a large state's diverse needs.
Yep.
You don't have a choice but to be more organized and more. Yeah. Otherwise stuff is just going to get completely lost in translation.
I have a joke that will probably get me in trouble, but we're going to say it anyway. I have a joke that state falconry clubs generally tend to mimic the organizational level of the state they are in politically. And that, so you will see clubs that are in states sometimes that have a little more contentious relationships among their members, and you can kind of trace that back. Texas is, if you know anything about Texas from a political perspective, Texas is a sort of big organization state with a lot of people, and we're kind of a prime example of that. We're a big falconry club that has a high level of organization and runs like that. So
I can see that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see that. And I don't think that's harsh. I just think it's just reality in some ways. I mean, there's probably a lot of truth to that.
There's exceptions, of course, and things like that.
There always are. There's always exceptions to every rule, but it is interesting how even with smaller states, and I think sometimes too, that can almost be a detriment, unfortunately, to some places that are smaller, have less members.
Sure.
You've got a smaller group of people that are able to kind of have more room for conflict and stuff sometimes because there's less people and because everybody knows everybody's business a little bit more and stuff and things like that. Sometimes it can allow, whenever you're having to deal with the same few people that encompass,
Sure.
A small representation of a small, overlying body of people, it can make it a little bit easier sometimes for some conflict to kind of arise in that. So
I sound like such a goody two shoes. I really do believe that every one of us has more in common than we have differences, and that we are stronger together. I care a lot about how people treat birds, and that birds are kept in good conditions, and that birds are healthy. And past that, if you are keeping your birds healthy and you are doing your best and you are trying, I believe falconry is incredibly diverse, and what we can devote to falconry individually is very diverse. And some people have more restrictive schedules or more restrictive lives, and they are still out there doing excellent, high quality falconry. But we are stronger together, and we're stronger together legally. We're stronger together politically. We're stronger together socially for sure, right? It's no fun to be in contentious relationships with people and say, well, I don't want to hawk with them, or I don't even want to talk to them, right? It's one thing not to like someone. Everyone has that. It's another thing to say that we can't even have dialogue with that person or those people. That's a very different thing.
Yeah, that's where it kind of starts to become a little dangerous.
Absolutely.
I agree with that. And being as we are such a small part of the overall hunting community, and we have such a small number of us worldwide, you kind of have to have a large degree, I should say, even just of a unifying body and a voice, because it's not like there's a whole bunch of us to, have a
Sure.
collective voice. I mean, so the collective voice really does need to be as unified as possible to have any impact whatsoever.
And we have an excellent relationship with our Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, our state fish and wildlife agency. And that wasn't always that way. That's largely because of the efforts of former and current THA members who are still around. A lot of our past presidents are here at this meet. And we also have what's called the Falconry and Raptor Council, which Don Raber will probably talk about. But that is another body that is linked to THA and Falconry in Texas. And that does a lot of the interface with Texas Parks and Wildlife. And so we have a great relationship. We are treated well. We're treated fairly. And they look at falconry favorably, which is wonderful. Generally, when we ask for things legally, they give it to us, which is nice.
Yeah. And you touched on something else that's very important, by mentioning that is that it is very important for a state club to have a good relationship with their DNR. I mean, it really is. I mean, if you're already at odds with your government fish and wildlife agency, it just makes things that much harder, in the grand scheme of things. So, but anyway, well, I mean, I guess now would be a good time to go ahead and just talk about some of, I don't know, your basic history in falconry, I guess. How did you get into this?
Mine's easy. I laugh. My dad came home from work and said, "Hey, I was 12," and he said, "I met a falconer. Do you know what that is?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "He seems like a pretty interesting guy. You should talk to him." And I said, okay. So we went and talked to him, and we talked to him several times. And I remember distinctly thinking at like age 12, I was like, well, I'm going to be a falconer one day. Now I was busy, and I realized I couldn't do it. So I was not a licensed falconer until I was 27. And it was literally as I finished graduate school. And I was like, okay, I'm done with this big milestone. And now I have a little bit more time, which is a joke. I didn't have more time, but that I have a little more time to devote to it. And, I could become a licensed falconer. But I remember saying, and I grew up a hunter. And so falconry was a pretty easy transition to me, because I was like, well, we're just hunting with a bird. And I just looked at it as a different method. Always loved animals, always had tons of different animals. Everything, livestock, reptiles and amphibians, all sorts of things. And then we had birds as a kid. And so, the animal husbandry part came pretty easy. The animal training part I had to learn a lot about, obviously. But then, the hunting part was, I actually think that's a huge thing for a lot of people, because it's one thing to learn to train a bird to fly to the fist and come to the lure and do some basic things.
It's the easy part.
Yeah. It's intensely difficult to learn your local landscape and how are you going to catch game. And if you came at that and learned how to hunt as a gun hunter, a bow hunter, or any method, or a trap or anything, right? Well, you had a lot of those skills already. And so, that was pretty easy for me. It was nice, when I got my permit in Texas, that the community was so welcoming and so helpful. And this is, some people know this about me already. When I was 12 years old, wanted to fly large falcons. That was it. Now I've flown red tails and, one Cooper's hawk and things like that, but I wanted to fly large. Everything since those early birds has been large falcons. And my wife, Mal, one time very astutely observed, she's like, you love the quarry and you are motivated by the quarry and you fly the birds that hunt that quarry most effectively. And I realized that. I was a waterfowler with a gun before I ever started falconry. And then I love upland birds, and I fly the birds that can hawk those quarry. So, and I do love my falcons, but it's interesting. I thought about that a lot, and I don't know what I would fly if there was some other bird that was more likely to take those quarry. But yeah, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it just happened to work out for you that what you were most passionate about happened to be kind of what you, it just by default, like you stumbled into the best relationship falconry wise for you. So,
and I love ducks. I raised ducks as a child, domestic ducks, wild waterfowl. I love hunting ducks. I enjoyed hunting them with a gun. I enjoy hunting them with a bird. I love the diversity of ducks, the phenotypic diversity, the species level diversity, what they do and how they behave. Not just under a falcon, which all the ducks are different, right? But I love what ducks look like on the environment and how your knowledge of ducks can make you a better falconer, right? And like we were talking today, and I said, well, there's a bunch of mallards on this pond. We're going to flush this pond completely differently if there were things like teal or widgeon or things like that. So, yeah. There's a lot of nuances to duck hawking, and really good duck hawkers have been working on that for years. And it puts more game in the bag, right? Like, someone who knows about ducks and their habits will probably catch, quite a bit more than someone who doesn't, who just views it as duck.
Yeah. Yeah. And, for someone like me, that would be something that I would have to really take extra time to really learn, because I'm mallards. It's just mallards. Ducks are mallards for me. That's all I have is mallards, right? I mean, occasionally you'll see just an oddball, aside from, I mentioned this yesterday in one of my conversations, but aside from, so-and-so Billy Bob's Peking ducks, that he keeps, around his, pond around his either home or business or whatever.
Sure.
The hell, it's mallards. We just have,
Well, so can we talk about something funny with ducks?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So today we have a lot of duck diversity here in the Central Plains. Like today we went out and we saw mallards, pintails, widgeon, shovelers, teal, and I don't know, that may have been it today, but it's very common for me in a given season at home to catch 10 different species of ducks throughout the course of a season. But one of our most common ducks in Texas, in North Texas especially, is the ringneck duck. And ringnecks are all over the continent. They cluster in some places, and we get just a ton of them in the Southern Plains. And they're sort of a medium-sized diving duck, and they're an interesting bird. And lots of people have noted this because their name is really bad. They're named for a chestnut colored ring around the drake's neck, and you can barely see it, sometimes even in hand, but they have a really beautiful ring, both the hen and the drake, around their bill. And so a lot of northern hunters call them ring bills. Well, to a good duck hawk, a good trained falcon, it's like playing dodgeball with second graders. They're quite easy to catch. And so the California guys started this, and they started this thing called the ring off. And the ring off is whoever catches the most ringneck ducks with a single bird in a single season wins the ring off. And they brought us into it, and now it's countrywide, I guess continent wide, and it's open. I will just tell you right now, it's always going to be someone from Texas or California who wins it. And we literally have a traveling belt, like a wrestling belt, where whoever wins that year, their name as the falconer and the name of the bird that won are engraved on it. And then the winner, whoever sends it to the winner, gets it engraved and sends it to the winner next year. And so it's kind of funny because if you have a brand new bird, you're thrilled to see ringnecks. They are one of the best birds for entering a new falcon. But when you've got really good birds or even decent birds, they just catch them like crazy. You can get bored of them. And there can be 200 ducks on a pond. And I used to have a bird, and there'd be 2 ringnecks out of 200 ducks, and she would fly through everyone else to catch the ringneck because it was the easiest. It was picking on the easiest kid to pick on.
Right.
And so the ring off is a pretty fun competition, and we all tease each other and razz each other and talk about who's ahead. And so, it's a fun time, and it makes a kind of a boring, I wouldn't say a boring, it makes a flight that could be considered mundane, a little more exciting because you're like, oh, one more for the ring off.
Yeah. I was kind of surprised about too, like when I was in South Africa, some of the ducks that they were hunting on some of these different
Yellow bills, right?
Yeah, the yellow bills. Dude, I was just like, these are the dumbest ducks that have ever lived. Like, how is this species still alive? This is the dumbest species I have ever seen.
Well, to be fair, they have their own defense mechanisms, but I think about this all the time. So, all right, here we are, a true apex predator, right? Humans are apex predator. And you have gone out and you have literally caught a duck hawk, a passage peregrine falcon, and you have trained the duck hawk, and now you have got a trained wolf. You have literally taken a wolf and through artificial selection, molded that thing into something that works with you. And all three of you are ganging up on this small diving duck. Sometimes I feel a little bit bad.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, they either just breed so prolifically, or they're, they, like you said, they've developed some other means of escape, defense, maneuverability. I don't know, but
they're probably not meant to deal with human plus falcon plus dog.
No, and it was quite obvious because whenever they flushed a couple of those, like whenever I was down at that Cape Falconry Club meet, I was just like, really? Like you're just serving yourself up. You might as well just go ahead and just fly up with a bottle of wine too. It's like
so that's my joke, and I only get to grouse hawk on vacation, but that's what I love about grouse is that your falcon will come down and lay a hit on a grouse, any of the prairie grouse, a hit that would outright kill or at least cripple a duck, and that grouse will fall to the ground, or maybe not even fall to the ground, and shrug that hit off like it's nothing. That grouse may not even make it all the way to the ground. It may regain its composure in the air and rocket out. And that duck hawk is giving it its absolute best, and it can't even come close to bringing that grouse to bag.
Yeah. Yeah, and I understand that's a huge reason why people consider that like the ultimate apex form of falconry. Absolutely. Because of the fact that those birds are so resilient and all that, and I get it. But yeah,
it's beyond the reach of most falconers.
Well, yeah, I mean,
just the logistics.
Exactly.
It's hard to live where grouse are.
Sure. Yeah, because there's literally nothing around it for millions of miles. It takes a really ultra rich and or dedicated person to pursue that, or just someone that's willing to live out in the middle of nowhere and with very little and resource wise and whatever. And kudos to all my friends that love that. I mean, it would be something that I would love to be able to pursue if it still exists by then, and the habitat still exists by then. Maybe someday, I don't know, but yeah, hats off to my friends that are able to do that with consistency. But I'll return your duck story with another duck story. Okay, this one really isn't even hawking related.
I love duck stories.
So you said you loved raising ducks as a kid, right? So you heard the story once upon a time, probably, of that prairie falcon that I imprinted. Oh, yes. And he ended up dying of that bacterial infection from most likely the baggy duck that I ended up probably gave him, right? It is what it is. It happens. That being said, in retrospect, part of the reason why that duck probably had more of that on him. So it was a domestic duck that I bought from a lady that was breeding and raising them, right? So this lady probably would have put your amount of love to absolute shame as a kid, as far as raising.
She treated the ducks well.
Oh boy. I don't know how this lady was still married.
Oh.
I mean, it's one thing to analyze the divorce rate amongst falconers and the conditions in which we allow our birds to coexist with us at times, right? This lady had probably hundreds of ducks of all varying species, ranging from Peking to mallards to you name it. She had like dog kennel size pens in her yard and all kinds of crates everywhere. She kept a lot of these ducks in her home. throughout her home.
That smelled wonderful, I'm sure.
Oh my God. I mean,
Was she married?
Yes.
Oh, good for them.
Yeah, and that's why I mean, I don't know how.
She sold you one?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
You must be a good liar.
Well, I can be persuasive.
Okay.
Or just, disguise the truth sometimes, whatever. But yeah, this lady probably had dozens of mallards in her house. And for everyone listening, if you're not familiar with the hygiene of ducks, it's not good generally. No. Yeah, this lady I don't know how she was able to keep all these ducks and stuff in her house. It was terrible.
The goofy thing about ducks is you can take a wild duck that you've shot or you've caught with a falcon, and they're clean. Their bodies are so clean. Yeah. And the moment you put that duck in a cage, you realize how intensely dirty they are as an animal. And they're spending their whole life keeping themselves clean in water.
Yeah. So I did my best to, this duck that I got, in her defense, at least this one mallard out of all these mallards this lady had was fairly clean. But I did a little extra cleaning with it whenever I got home. I tried to do what due diligence that I could, but that being said, you just would have had to seen this lady's property and home.
I bet that was a sight.
It was literally, it was duck paradise and hell all rolled into one. Like, it was quite, it was pungent, and it was quite, it was an interesting place.
Everybody has their thing.
Yeah. Well, this lady's thing, I'm surprised hasn't completely destroyed her life. But,
maybe it has. That's all right.
Yeah, she's the definition of a duck hoarder, for sure. I mean, it was literally like she should have been on an episode of Hoarders, for sure.
For ducks.
Yeah, for ducks. Normally you just think rats or whatever, or all that kind of stuff. Right now, it was ducks for this lady. But anyway, so funny side note. That was how I got my one baggy duck that unfortunately led to my bird's likely demise. I can't completely pin it on that, but it is the most likely culprit. But anyway, so yeah, you meet all kinds of weird, interesting, people and stuff, as we are all weird and interesting in and of ourselves.
Oh, there's a whole freak show at this meet.
Oh yeah,
talk to everybody
for sure. Well, and most of these people too are, including yourself, are members of other worlds too, like the herp world and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, I'm so it's interesting. I've probably literally done a subset of everything you could do in the herp world. I grew up as a child catching them and keeping them in captivity. And then I still do that. I still have snakes at home. So I'm a herpetoculturalist, right? On a very small level. And then I worked with them in the zoo for a couple of years, right? A long time ago in the Fort Worth Zoo. And then, so I was a zookeeper, and then some more animal husbandry stuff. And then I am a professional herpetologist who have studied reptiles and amphibians for essentially my entire career. So I work on them in an academic context too. And a lot of that's in my current work is endangered species stuff. And there's lizards up here that we've worked on, and up here in Lubbock. And we say, well, and this affects falconry too. This goes back to falconry. A lot of these species are called priority grassland species, and grasslands are by far the most imperiled habitat in this country in terms of the proportion that we have lost, that we have not restored. So wetlands have been lost in a huge way too, but we've preserved a lot of them, both by the Clean Water Act, but also things like the Ramsar Convention, which is international. But we've also put a lot of wetlands back through mitigation. We've lost a majority of our grasslands, and we have not put them back. And where we still have them, we have a lot of problems with invasive grasses. And that affects our falconry because that affects our quarry, right? We're in a place that used to have a lot of lesser prairie chickens, and they are gone from habitat change and habitat loss. And so a lot of these reptile and amphibian species are using those grasslands just like our quarry and just like our raptors. And we're losing them. And they don't have the ability to move to a different place. Like raptors can change their migration patterns and can go to this place versus this place, and they can survive. Reptiles and amphibians almost never have that option. So when they blink out on a landscape, they blink out in that place and go locally extinct. And then what we call the metapopulation starts to collapse, because if you blink out, you might be able to recolonize from an adjacent patch. But if that adjacent patch blinks out too, and the one next to that blinks out, you wind up with smaller and smaller isolated patches of habitat with these species. And they quite literally just go extinct gradually in front of your eyes over a period of time. And arguably that's what's happened with the lesser prairie chicken, which was a grouse that falconers used to be able to fly in this state, and it's gone now. So a lot of my professional work works on these priority grassland species.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and yeah, I mean, it all ties together. I mean, they don't call it an ecosystem for nothing. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's truly all reliant on all of these different aspects just somehow living in some kind of balance. And unfortunately, we always come and screw it up, it seems like. But it is what it is. I mean, how hard do you think it's going to be? I mean, this is something that I kind of brush on with other guests, and as time moves on, and nobody has a good answer for the most part, because it's unanswerable almost, except for one clear answer that nobody's probably ever going to be brave enough to suggest, which is population control.
Well, the way we'll never live long enough to see it, but the way demographics look now, right? Like populations across the world are likely about set to decrease. But yes, in the United States, our population is projected to rise for a long period of time. I don't see a great solution to it from a falconry perspective. I know this has been discussed on the podcast several times.
Sure.
If you love falconry as an art or a sport or whatever you want to call it, and I think about this all the time, if large falcons were taken away from me, what would I do? And I've flown one Merlin. I would probably fly Merlins. And I could see myself flying Merlins into the future, because I couldn't fly large falcons. If people love falconry, they're going to have to adapt. They're going to say, well, what quarry do I have? And it is in many places going to become more urban, and that has legal challenges, that has logistical challenges, but it's going to have to become more urban. Some people are going to trip hawk. They're going to say, I'm going to train my bird. I'm going to work on my bird's, everything about my bird's flight at home where I can in a training context. And then I'm going to drive a long way and take my bird and go on a trip. And so hopefully that trip can last as long as you can, but a lot of people can't do that for weeks or months. Hence
the rich comment earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's very, fortunate. People are fortunate to be able to do that. So I think state falconry clubs and falconry organizations in general need to do their best to be sort of nimble to think about the future and try and keep some of those avenues legal and open for people to practice falconry at home. I don't think it's possible for most people to do true falconry, which is the pursuit of wild quarry with a trained raptor. I don't think that's possible for most people to do if they can't do it at home. Like if I could only trip hawk, I don't know whether I would be a falconer.
Yeah.
But I can do falconry at home, and I think it's important. The other thing we're going to have to think about, and this is really forward thinking with younger generations, is what's our housing crisis look like? If you have facility requirements that require you to have a brick and mortar type facility and it has to be inspected, which I understand, those are legal requirements. Well, what do you do if there's entire generations of people that can't afford homes?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you just going to watch your recruitment just drop off? Now, we don't have to recruit here in Texas. We're very fortunate that we're getting like 20 to 30 new apprentice applications a year. But I know some states falconry is declining and hunting is declining in some places. And that's the same problem everyone faces. Lack of access, both to land, to hunt, and to quarry. So these are big, big challenges. And that's where I think, more towards the urban angle or the suburban angle or the rural areas right around the urban stuff. But people are going to have to find their own niches and what works for them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you're going to start seeing some people start to get a little ingenuitive in regards to that kind of stuff, because they're either going to have to start living in apartment complexes, flying passage kestrels or something, that or just keep a red tail in the spare bedroom, whatever, and I mean, people have done it, sure. Absolutely. But I mean, as I always say, where there's a will, there's a way. But I mean, it's kind of like, who knows, there might be some people that start, hey, I've got, a little bit of extra room on my property. I could build, X amount of chamber mews. And maybe if people start running out of places, then, they can start renting a mews, like people would, rent horse stables or, whatever, or, I don't know, I mean, who knows?
There's another trend I want to touch on, which is an interesting thing I noticed, because I teach students, and I have taught students for essentially my entire professional career. And everybody sees changes in generations above them, in your own generation, and below them. And one thing I really notice is that younger generations, right? So I'm 41, I was born in 1982. And younger generations increasingly want things organized. And it's how they were raised, right? And it's why this meet is popular, because it's organized. People feel like it's an organized event they can come to. Older generations tended to be a lot better about, hey, I want to do this. The ingenuity was there. I'm going to make it work. They didn't have the resources. Those books, those internet forums, Facebook, that didn't exist to connect them. So they went and they figured out how to do it themselves. That's the genesis of North American falconry, right? Taking things that people had done on other continents and bringing it here and adapting it to our landscapes and our birds. And so we shouldn't judge younger people by the standards of older generations. And what I mean by that is, because someone wants something organized and they think it should be organized, and that's the expectation that they come into it with, sure, we can educate them and say, hey, it's not always organized. That's not how this is. But we shouldn't berate them or judge them for that, because that's the paradigm they're approaching this with. They're coming at it as this is an organized thing, right? You have this Texas Hawking Association. There's a falconry packet you get from Texas Parks and Wildlife. They're coming at it. They think it's organized. I mean, we get people who come to this meet and they say, hey, what time is everything? What time are people going out? And we're like, well, it's really not like that. And we have to tell them, hey, fundamentally, this is an individual thing that you're doing on your own and you have to make work. But we shouldn't judge them when they come in, because I've seen this with older falconers. They say, well, they don't have any motivation. They don't have any get up and go. And I said, well, that was sort of beaten out of them in their youth. They weren't allowed to do anything on their own. Why would you expect them to just come into it and just, shoot to the moon right now?
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective on that. And I agree with that. Like I said, with every passing generation, especially with the way the education system keeps devolving in a way.
You can say that.
Yeah. It's more about, it's not so much about individual thinking anymore. It's about, you need to, learn by this rigid set of standards and rules and standardized testing, whatever. And a lot of that also comes with a structured, organized schedule, just like you were saying. So yes, that is probably a good, valid point.
Here's one more thing that feeds into this.
Yeah.
Younger generations, by and large, greatly fear failure. It's because they were raised where failure has high costs. We don't let kids fail anymore in all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And because we don't let kids fail, they don't develop the resilience to go through failure.
Absolutely.
Well, falconry is filled with failure. It starts with an F. They both start with an F. There's failure everywhere. Bad things happen to birds. Bad things happen to us. Bad things happen to dogs. Falconry is just filled with so many perils. And do you have the resiliency to say, well, I screwed up. What did I do wrong? Or the maturity to say, hey, I really think I did that as best I could and it still went bad, because that happens too. How am I going to do it better next time?
Mm-hmm. Which brings the next aspect of failure, which is also adversity as well. And,
exactly.
Learning, just pretty much like you outlined, adversity is another thing that is becoming, for some reason, seemingly harder for people to, learn to deal with.
We call this in teaching and stuff, we call this lawnmower parenting. Mm-hmm. The helicopter parent sits above and watches. Mm-hmm. The lawnmower parent gets in front and cuts down all the obstacles in front of them. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, people have to have obstacles and grit it out.
Yeah.
Fail and move through that and come through and develop resiliency.
Yeah.
So,
it's just like, it's kind of like when my kid first got into Boy Scouts, I remember going on one of their scouting trips and watching all these young, just really young boys trying to set up camp in the worst way imaginable. Like it was literally like, I still have PTSD from, to some degree from watching them just fail miserably at everything, from setting up camp to putting up their tents to everything. And I'm sitting here about ready to have an aneurysm. And the scout master, he just looks at me and says, "Let him fail, man." And I was just like, well, okay. He's just like, you have to just let them figure it out, because if you don't, they're going to expect somebody to hold their hand like every single year that they get older and whatever, and they'll figure it out. And then when the younger kids come in, they'll teach them. That's what you have to do. You just have to let them. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense. I've always tried to be kind of a hybrid in that regard. Sure. There's
just a balance, of course.
Yeah. For sure. But no, you pretty much summarized that perfectly with that sentiment. I don't know, man. It just, we'll see how things continue to develop, but no, it's a lot of good points to touch on with that. And it's, once again, it's just another one of these topics of conversation, especially all these people that are wanting to get into something like this, that the resources continue to decrease every year.
Absolutely. It's very challenging.
The adversity is only going to keep getting more and more and more and more involved. And there's going to be more and more things you're going to have to overcome to be able to do this every passing year. So for everyone listening that wants to get into it, just keep that in mind. You're getting into it at also a great time, but also a terrible time.
Well, several folks have said we have unprecedented access to raptors for falconry, and we have the worst access ever to land and quarry.
Exactly.
And it's just new challenges. There's always, it's not like the challenges would have ever gone away for anyone.
No.
There's always a challenge somewhere, and it's our job as an organization to meet it, right?
Yep. Just a number of challenges.
The number and what type.
Yep,
so
exactly.
I don't know. I laugh. I'm pretty resilient. I've failed a lot and made a lot of mistakes. So
as have I.
You kind of come through it and try and do your best. And
yeah. That's all we can do, because we're human, and that's really all you can do as a human being, is to continue just to keep on keeping on, as old Joe Dirt says.
I'll give you one, and he'll probably be mad that I'm quoting him, but there's a great falconer named Steve Duffy, and he gave me what I think is probably the single best piece of falconry advice that I've ever heard. I think about it all the time, and it's one sentence. He said, "They're not people in bird suits."
Very much so. And people would also do well to remember that dogs aren't people in dog suits either.
Exactly.
It's the same deal. The anthropomorphization of all these animals is something that is just a huge hurdle, I think, to people in general. We always want to think that everybody thinks and does things like us, but in reality, animal kingdom is way different.
Sure. We all have our own perspective.
Yep. Well, I think then it's a good time to go ahead and get that one or two memorable stories from you that we always want to get from people, and come close to wrapping this thing up, I think.
Sure. As I said before, I fly passage peregrines, and I love passage peregrines, and I love duck hawking. And so a lot of my memories are, fond memories are duck hawking. But I guess a story that sticks out to me that I just love is that a couple of years ago, I was flying a brown bird that we had trapped on South Padre Island. And she just trained so quickly. Her name is Sea Oats. She's named for a grass that you would find on the Texas coast on the beach. And so, I name my birds after grass. And We had flown her, and she had not been successful that morning. So this is like day 60, and she had caught 6 ducks, like day 60 since trap, and she had caught like 6 ducks already. This bird trained quickly. And Neil Balchin and I had flown her that morning, and she had chased ducks, and she chased them out of sight. And I could see on my GPS, she went 2,000 feet away. And as she came back, she flew over every pond. There were like 5 ponds, and she flew over every pond on the way back, checking them, looking down to see if there were ducks on them. And I called her down, and then I took her, we waited, we had lunch, and then I took her to a pond a big, gigantic pond that I would only fly well-made birds on that were flying really high. And I put this bird up at like day 60, flying her the second time that day over, in this case, probably about 100 ducks, mixed flock, various things. And she flew it like a wild peregrine. She was a wild peregrine, but she flew it like a wild peregrine. And when ducks would try to leave, she would start stoops at them and intimidate them back in, but she would maintain her pitch, and she never lost control of the pond. And just like a wild peregrine, she watched this large group of ducks, and she waited, showed the patience to wait, like a good duck hawk is patient. And she showed the patience to wait until one group, diving ducks, redheads, tried to escape out the side. She didn't stoop at the water, and she waited until they cleared over land, and then started her stoop and knocked one through a mesquite tree and brought it to bag. And this was a bird that was literally on the beach 60 days before and had come into falconry and just soaked it up. And one of the easy ones, and said, this is what I want to do. I want to be part of this. And so that was a cool experience. And I have a lot of things like that, but watching them work wild waterfowl in the way that they would do in the wild, potentially. And I've had wild peregrines come in, like on literally that same pond. I had a different bird come down and stoop ducks, and then a second peregrine came in and stoop ducks as well. And I was like, where'd that come from? And it was a wild bird that had seen my bird waiting on. And when I flushed the ducks, that bird came in and stooped ducks too. And I realized that bird was essentially a wild bird engaging in falconry for those few seconds. And so you're just taking this wild animal and you're just adapting it to work with you just enough to build a little bit of a connection, and then become very loyal. And
and that's I think the meat and potatoes of the allure of why everybody just gets so enthralled in all this.
Absolutely.
And because really, sure, it's amazing watching these animals do what they do, and they do what they do because that's what they were,
evolution, brought natural up to do, selection, right?
So sure, nature in and of itself is incredible, but the fact that we
get to watch it,
exactly, we get the front row seat, and then are able to even build a relationship to whatever degree in the first place to even get that
with
front
the
row
most
seat.
Arguably one of the more independent animals on the planet.
Well, yeah, because the thing is never going to love you. It's never going to truly like you. It's not. It doesn't have the brain capacity or the capability to do that. So, learning how to get an animal that otherwise would have no real affection or trust in you to have any faith in you whatsoever to benefit them from their standpoint it's amazing.
Every time my son is not a falconer, but he's been hawking more times than he cares to count. And anytime a bird flies away, I always remind him that peregrine means wanderer.
That's a good point. I didn't know that, actually. Yeah, that's funny. Well, does that mean that prairie means pain in the ass?
That's for you to decide. I know you already talked to Matt, so there you go. You guys can hash that out.
We can probably assign our own definitions to all these different words for some of these different hawks, But yeah, no, that's awesome, man.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, no, and before we end though, I want to get your piece of advice from you though. I always get Here lately, God. I've been getting a piece of advice from every falconer that I have on the podcast. Everybody has some degree of a perspective or sentiment or words of wisdom, that they can pass on to people that are either wanting to get into this or are currently in it or whatever. I mean, everybody, there's always at least one super valuable thing that people seem to really learn and are impacted by.
My advice is super simple, is that I do not believe in reinventing wheels. I argue that I've never had an original thought in my life. Find the person who does what you want to do, or find multiple people who do what you want to do, and watch their bird fly. And when you see their bird fly and you like it and you say, I want a bird that flies like that, ask them for help, copy what they do, and do what they do. Find a mentor who can help you, who flies. The vast majority of us are more than willing to share their time and knowledge. And that's a wonderful thing about this sport. So find those people who can help you and do what they do, and you will be successful.
It's a great piece of advice. And once again, it's one of those things that another thing that people can't hear enough. And even for the people that know better, and know that, sometimes it's nice to continue to hear those things, because sometimes we all need those subtle reminders, that, we need to not try and overcomplicate things.
Of course.
So, but no, like I said, man, thanks so much for being willing to have the conversation, to have me down here, and I'm glad that the THA saw this as something that's a worthwhile venture. You know what I mean? So, like I said, appreciate you all, or everybody that's going to participate and be willing to participate. And who knows? I mean, it would be cool to kind of make this an annual thing or something.
We'll get you back down here with your birds. Bring a dirt hawk. You'll catch game here in Lubbock.
I will do my best to make sure that happens next season. So, Anyway, thanks again, man. And we can call this good.
Thank you, sir.
All right.